Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today we're diving into something that just wrapped up, an event that's definitely making waves globally, though maybe not on everyone's main newsfeed. I'm talking about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, the SCO in Tianjin, China. Now, this isn't just any old diplomatic get-together. We're talking about some really influential nations here. Think Russia, China, India, all in the same room. It's often called one of the world's least known multilateral groups, which is kind of amazing because its influence, it's growing, no doubt about it.
You've really hit on a crucial point there. This deep dive, it's going to give you a pretty unique view into how the world order is shifting right now. We'll be looking at how these major powers are, well, realigning. They're pushing for new kinds of international cooperation, sure, but also managing some pretty intense competition, all happening under this SCO umbrella. It's a fascinating glimpse into, well, the future of global power, really.
Exactly. So our mission today is to pull apart the key talks from the summit, maybe highlight some surprising diplomatic moments, and there were a few, and crucially, explore what this all means long-term for global trade, security, the whole power balance. So if you're ready, let's unpack this.
Okay.
Let's start with the basics. For listeners who follow world events but maybe don't have the SEO on speed dial, what is this organization exactly, and why is it demanding our attention right now?
That's a great place to start because its history is quite revealing. It actually grew out of something smaller, the Shanghai Five mechanism, which started way back in 1996. Then in 2001, it officially became the SDO. Its original core mission was pretty focused, actually, to combat what they called the three evils.
Terrorism, separatism, and extremism, right?
Precisely. Think of it initially as a regional security arrangement, trying to stabilize Central Asia after the Cold War dust settled.
But it's clearly moved way beyond just regional security now. Looking at the membership today, who are the key players in this, well, expanding club? And what does that expansion tell us?
Oh, absolutely. The growth has been significant. The core members now, Russia, China, India, Iran, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. Quite a list. And it's still growing. Belarus joined officially in 2024. And just yesterday, September 1st, 2025, Laos was accepted as a dialogue partner.
Wow. Yeah.
This isn't just adding flags to the meeting room. This kind of expansion, it's a pretty clear signal. You could see it as a potential, maybe even deliberate, challenge to the existing global power setup, a real push towards a more multipolar world.
That's fascinating. And you can see how different countries might view it differently. Like Kazakhstan sees it as a way to boost its global profile, build economic ties. But then you have the big players, Russia and China, who, well, let's be honest, probably see it as a key tool to cement their influence in Central Asia, that strategically vital region.
That's a really good way to frame it. Everyone's at the table, maybe, but with slightly different menus in mind.
Right. It's like that internal dynamic is key.
Exactly. This divergence of interests, even within a common framework, that's something we'll definitely see recurring.
Okay, let's pivot to the main event then. The Tianjin Summit, August 31st to September 1st. It was billed, quite loudly, as the largest ever SCO summit in history. That alone says something. What was the main goal? What was China as the host aiming for?
Well, under China's stewardship, the big ambition was multifaceted. Strengthen trust between members, definitely. Expand cooperation across different areas. And, importantly, create opportunities for, shared prosperity. The stated goal, and it's worth quoting, was to show that dialogue and unity are stronger than division and rivalry.
A clear message in today's world.
Very much so. It wasn't just rhetoric. It felt like a deliberate statement amidst all the global tension.
And President Xi Jinping, in his opening remarks, he didn't shy away from those core issues, terrorism, separatism, extremism. But he also specifically mentioned refraining from hostilities along the borderline, which is interesting. But here's where it got really, really interesting for observers. India's Prime Minister Modi, he took a very assertive stance, didn't he?
He really did. Exceptionally vocal. Modi laid out what he called a zero-tolerance roadmap for terrorism, declared point blank that it cannot be accepted in any form. And he didn't just speak generally. He specifically brought up the Pahalgam attack from April 2025.
The one where 26 Indian tourists were killed. Tragic.
Exactly. He called it an attack on humanity. And this wasn't just strong words for the cameras. It translated into a significant diplomatic win for India. Why? Because India's tough stance on cross-border terrorism was actually written into the summit's final joint declaration.
And that's important because
Because back in June 2025, India had refused to endorse a defense minister's statement precisely because that Pahalgam attack wasn't mentioned. So getting it included in the main Tianjin declaration, that was a clear diplomatic victory for New Delhi.
that really sends a message. Okay, let's talk about the visuals too. The reporting highlighted a clear troika dynamic: India, Russia, China. What do we see in terms of those key relationships playing out?
The visuals were quite striking, almost like diplomatic choreography. Modi was seen in animated conversation, even light banter with Xi Jinping, so engagement there. But the interaction with Russia's Vladimir Putin seemed, well, warmer, described consistently as having warmth and camaraderie.
And Putin called him Priya Dost.
He did, dear friend. And he also signaled plans to visit India in December 2025, a visit that would mark, interestingly, 15 years of their special privileged strategic partnership. That's the official term they use. It speaks volumes.
And that India-Russia relationship, it really seems to be holding firm, maybe even deepening, despite a lot of pressure, especially from the West. What actions back that up?
Absolutely, the actions are telling. India deciding not just to continue buying Russian oil, but to increase those purchases in September 2025. That's a big one, especially with U.S. tariffs in place. It's more than just economics.
It signals that strategic autonomy concept India talks about.
Exactly. That ability or determination to make foreign policy choices based on national interests, not external pressure from, any single bloc or power. And the discussions weren't just about oil. They touched on boosting defense cooperation. Things like the S-400 and S-500 missile defense systems, very advanced stuff, and the Su-57 fighters, Russia's latest jets.
Serious military hardware.
Indeed. And Putin also apparently appreciated China and India's efforts to resolve the crisis in Ukraine. He even expressed hope the U.S. would move in the same direction.
Yeah.
It positions India and China as independent players, doesn't it?
It certainly does. So on one side, India's asserting this autonomy with Russia. But how does this play into the bigger picture, U.S. influence? And was everyone at the summit treated with the same warmth?
Right, crucial questions. Modi really walked that tightrope of strategic autonomy. Consider this. He spoke with Ukraine's President Zelensky just one day before meeting Putin.
Wow, okay, that's balancing act.
It absolutely is. It shows India's capacity, or at least its ambition, to engage with all sides in major conflicts. Very few can pull that off. But contrast that with Pakistan's Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif. The reports described him as being royally ignored by both Modi and Putin.
Ouch. Ignored.
Pretty much. It wasn't subtle. It highlighted his sort of diminished influence within the group at that moment, and it sent a very clear signal from India linked back to that cross-border terrorism issue.
Yeah.
So unity is the theme, but power dynamics are definitely visible.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Beyond the high-level diplomacy and security talk, the SCO seems increasingly focused on economics too, shaping a new economic order almost. What's the push there?
That's a huge part of its current identity, yes.
Right.
The SCO openly calls for a fair, multipolar world order, and central to that is stressing the role of the UN and international law, implicitly contrasting with unilateral actions. A major piece of this economic vision is challenging the dominance of the US dollar.
The de-dollarization trend we hear about.
Exactly, and it's not brand new within the SCO. Back in 2019, Pakistan's Imran Khan suggested trading in local currencies. Then Iran, in 2022, floated the idea of a single SCO currency. And President Putin, he's been actively supporting, quote, creating the SCO's own payment and settlement infrastructure. Plus, pushing hard for using national currencies more in trade. It's all aimed at reducing reliance on Western financial rails.
Sounds like a very ambitious plan. Reshaping global finance. But here's a fascinating wrinkle. There's an official Economic Development Strategy Action Plan until 2030. Sounds impressive. Yet, Kazakhstan's President Tokayev pointed out something quite striking. He apparently noted that in the SCO's entire 20-year history, not a single major economic project has actually been implemented under the SCO's own banner. That seems like a major contradiction.
It absolutely is, and it really gets to the heart of the SCO's internal complexity. You have this grand rhetoric about multilateral economics, about building a new financial system together, but the reality, member states often seem to prefer bilateral deals, working one-on-one rather than through complex multilateral SCO projects.
Why do you think that is? Just easier, more direct benefit.
Probably a mix of things, maybe efficiency, maybe strategic advantage in keeping deals closer. China, for example, hasn't waited for the SCO to coordinate everything. They've pushed ahead very actively with things like the Belt and Road Initiative or the China plus Central Asia format, kind of working around the main SCO economic structure. And reports suggest this might have even overcome some past Russian reluctance about deep economic integration within the SCO itself.
So China's driving its own economic agenda, using different avenues.
Seems that way. And you see the results. Look at Kazakhstan's trade with China, over $31.5 billion now. That actually surpasses its trade with Russia. It clearly shows how these economic tides are shifting, often along bilateral lines, not necessarily SCO ones.
Interesting. So a united front on wanting a multipolar world, but the economic engine runs on multiple tracks. Now let's talk about the West. How does the SCO perceive the West? Especially given that history, like the U.S. being denied observer status back in 2005, what's that self-other dynamic like?
It's complicated and definitely layered with historical context. Now, a lot of Western analysis tends to paint the SCO simply as anti-Western, a counterweight. But the SCO's own official language emphasizes the Shanghai spirit, mutual trust, equality, respect for diversity, common development. That's the ideal they project. But yes, there's a clear othering of the West when it's seen as interfering in Eurasia, particularly around things like color revolutions or perceived attempts at regime change. They often bring up specific examples, NATO in Kosovo in '99, the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. These events are frequently cited as reasons for their own emphasis on non-interference.
So it sounds like a fundamental disagreement on sovereignty versus intervention. Is it fair to say they view Western talk of human rights or democracy with suspicion, as maybe a cover for other motives?
That's often exactly how it's framed in their discourse, yes. The leadership in SCO countries frequently voices concern that promoting democracy or human rights is used as a justification for actions they believe are really aimed at regime change or destabilizing countries from within. There's also significant worry about Western soft power.
Like media influence. The internet.
Precisely. They often talk about subversive information or political technologies being used through media and online platforms to manipulate domestic politics. And look, sometimes comments from the West don't help bridge that gap. There was that comment by Peter Navarro, a U.S. figure criticized by some as a caste-based slur, about Brahmins making money from Russian oil. Things like that just fuel the mistrust.
Yeah, you can see how comments like that would deepen the divide. But despite all this friction, this suspicion, are there any areas where the SCO sees room for actual cooperation with the West? It can't be purely adversarial, can it?
No, not entirely. There's a degree of pragmatism. The official SCO position acknowledges that cooperation is possible, even beneficial, on certain specific issues. What kind of issues? Well, things like fighting international terrorism, remember, that was a founding goal. Tackling drug trafficking, a huge regional problem. And trying to ensure long-term stability in Afghanistan. That's a big one where interests potentially align.
Afghanistan was given observer status, right?
Yes, back in 2012. Which underlines that it's seen as an area of shared concern where maybe, just maybe, some broader cooperation, even involving Western interests, might be needed. These are threats that arguably transcend the usual geopolitical fault lines.
Okay, so pragmatic cooperation is possible on specific shared threats. Yet, despite the summit's united front, that Shanghai spirit language, we hear commentators call it the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Based on everything we've discussed, what really jumps out to you as the core internal challenges? What makes it less cohesive than it might appear?
I think that nickname, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, really captures the core tension. It stems from the sheer diversity of geopolitical interests among the member states. 9 members now, soon more perhaps. They share some broad goals, yes, but they're individual national priorities. They often pull in very different directions.
It's like the India-China border issue.
Exactly. That's a prime example. Or the recurring border clashes we've seen between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, both SCO members.
Right.
These bilateral disputes show that the SCO, as an organization, often really struggles to resolve internal conflicts, or even to effectively mediate them. It's like a very complex family dinner. Everyone shows up, agrees on some basic house rules, but they often prefer to settle their own arguments privately, maybe even away from the main table.
So more of a forum than a unified bloc sometimes.
In those instances, yes, it can function more like a security-oriented talking club, as some put it. Great for dialogue, less effective perhaps at enforcing collective decisions or resolving deep-seated bilateral issues among its own members. That's the contradiction.
Right. So wrapping up this deep dive then, it's clear Tianjin wasn't just another summit. It felt like a real snapshot of a world in flux. Major powers finding new footing, new relationships, and especially India's strategic autonomy that really came through strongly.
Absolutely. And what's truly fascinating, I think, is watching the SCO navigate its path, promoting this multipolar vision, strengthening its own internal links, but at the same time, managing this incredibly complicated dance with the West. Sometimes partners on specific threats, often antagonists on broader principles. That dynamic, it's a key indicator for where the international order might be heading.
And that ability of nations, like India demonstrated, to maintain that strategic autonomy, engaging multiple sides, refusing to be locked into just one camp, that feels increasingly crucial in today's world. It really pushes back against that old Cold War black and white view of alliances, doesn't it?
It really does. And it leaves us with a big question, one for you, our listener, to think about. In this world that's becoming more interconnected in some ways, yet more fragmented in others, how much real influence can these regional groupings like the SDO actually wield? How much can they shape global norms, shift power balances? And maybe more importantly, what do these subtle, sometimes confusing shifts actually mean for your life, for the economy, for stability in different regions?
Plenty to think about there. We hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights into this really powerful yet still somewhat overlooked organization and the impact it's having. Thanks for joining us.